What's something that you are surprised how cheap it is? Cars in the United States. I grew up in Brazil where cars were a luxury for the middle and upper class. Multiple cars were only for the millionaire class. An upper middle class family would have one car and they would take care of it lovingly for decades. I moved to the US and grew up here. And I was able to buy a car while working for Hollywood Video making $7.50 an hour. Granted, it was an used car from 2001, this was in 2007, but when I told my dad in Brazil this he flipped the fuck out. He had saved for 4 to 5 years to buy a fucking 1993 car in 2005. I didn't tell him that my family back in the US had multiple cars. I had a car, my sister had a car, my mom had a car and my stepdad had one. All bought for less than $10,000 each. I didn't want to make him even sadder. Airplane tickets. A friend of mine was able to fly from Germany to Portugal for €30 last year. Trips by train between certain German cities are usually more expensive than a lot of plane rides across Europe. Insane. You are breaking my freaking heart. Here in Canada, it would cost over $100 to fly to a city 100 miles away. Flying to Australia last year cost me $2,500. I'm going to have to start flapping my arms. Ridiculously long Ethernet cables. You can get a 100 feet cable for $9.99 at Walmart. That's 10 cents per foot for insulated wiring that allows you to upload and download data at insane speeds. How is that profitable? Most modern electronics. The level of tech and knowledge that is required to design and manufacture some of this gear and certain pieces are sold incredibly cheap. Especially CPUs. Amazing manufacturing technologies. Considering the price of new cars at the dealership, used ones with about 10,000 miles. In 2008 I got a 2007 Fusion with 12,000 kilometers, 7,500 miles, for half of what it would have cost to buy new. It had a warranty for 100,000 kilometers. My parents thought it was some miracle deal, but it was just good negotiating, plus one blowjob. Anyone could have got the same deal. Stuff from IKEA. I saved for nearly 10 years for a down payment on my first home. I didn't want to move my old, tattered, hand-me-down furniture. I wanted a fresh start. My mother-in-law mentioned checking out IKEA, and I was able to furnish most of the house with just a few weekends of overtime work. I worked at a company that makes dance costumes. I like to make costumes in my spare time. Because of my job, I got to see how much it actually cost a factory to produce a costume. Labor plus materials came out to $15. $15. In order for me to make the same costume, the cheapest fabric I could get would be $20 a yard. So clothes. Manufacturing clothing is so cheap, it's not even worth it to make your own. Yeah, I used to be really into sewing and looked into starting it as a little side thing as a teenager, but it just wasn't worth it. Nothing can compete with fast fashion. You can buy a tank cheaper than a Lamborghini. Postage is a deal. Just think about it. I give them under $1 and in return, they take my sealed envelope anywhere in the US. For a little more, they will take it anywhere in the world. Honestly, modern delivery services are something to marvel at. Human labor. You can rent a human being, the most awesome and complex mechanism in the universe, for $15 an hour to do menial work. 4K TVs. No one I know has one, but you can get even large ones now, 55-inch, for under $300. For some reason, no one seems to care about 4K TVs. Just got a 65 inches 4K for $500 a couple of weeks ago, when the living room TV died. The TV is dead. Long live the TV, TBH. I didn't give a shit about the 4K part, but the refresh rate, HDMI ports and size sold me. Also, it was on clearance to make room for the new models about to come in. Looked pretty damn good last week. Black obsidian. Apparently, Black obsidian is the most common sort of obsidian, so it's actually sort of cheap to buy. You can legitimately buy a square meter of it for under $100 in some areas, which I find cool. Black obsidian. Apparently, black obsidian is the most common sort of obsidian, so it's actually sort of cheap to buy. You can legitimately buy a square meter of it for under $100 in some areas, which I find cool. Alcohol anywhere in the world, except Finland, Norway and Sweden. It is bad in Canada too. I go on a fishing trip to Canada every other year and it is cheaper for me to buy Canadian whiskey in the US, pay the taxes at the border than it is to buy it in Canada. As a Canadian, I can't relate to the majority of these. Food? Airplane tickets? I'm just gonna cry into my $2 double-double from Tim's. 12 eggs are usually sold for $1 or less. That's kind of nuts when you think about it. Fast food in America, holy shit, that is cheap, so cheap I don't eat it. I can't trust it, it is too cheap. A small meal at McDonald's in New Zealand can be like $20. Now that I live in France, the answer is vacuum cleaners. In Canada, a good vacuum cleaner is going to set you back hundreds of dollars. In France, typically, a good vacuum cleaner is less than €100. Library card. It's free. Having fun isn't hard. Chocolate and coffee. Growing that shit is no joke and it's probably going to go extinct before mankind does. Also, this is going to sound all hail corporate, but in the UK, fairy washing up liquid. It's like a quid a bottle and lasts for months. Fresh produce in the US has always struck me as cheap. I can get a head of cauliflower to $1.50, a pound of carrots for $1, a mango for 50 cents. Always mind-blogging to me. Plastic and silicone goods. You can get a silicone spatula in any color for 90 pence, or a plastic cake decorating comb from China for 22 pence. How do you manufacture, package and ship anything for 22 pence? Pineapples. They take 2 entire years to grow. My dad planted the top of his pineapple once. The plant grew pretty large, and after about 5 years, a tiny little pineapple finally sprouted. It didn't get any bigger than a pine cone and died, and then the plant died. Lol. Perhaps Northern Illinois isn't the best place to try to grow a pineapple.